Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Canal Algérie's news. To the headlines. Specialized commercial court legal pillar underway pursuant to the instructions of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, and as part of the new economic policy based on encouraging investment and achieving judicial security for economic litigant investors. Also in economy, tonight we focus on the various trade agreements outside of non-hydrocarbon export with several countries such as Tunisia, Italy, and Egypt. Lastly, in our international news, the Moroccan Social Front launches a call for mass protests on the upcoming Monday to denounce the unprecedented rise in prices and the human rights violations by Al Makhzen. Good evening, those are tonight's headlines. In its 42nd session, the Executive Council of the African Union, which has taken place at the headquarters of the Continental Organization, Addis Ababa, elected on Thursday the candidate of Algeria, Judge Ben Saoula Shafiqa, for the membership of the African Court on Human and People's Rights as part of a second 6-year term. The election of Dr. Ben Saoula Shafiqa comes after Algeria submitted her candidacy for a second term in her capacity as a judge of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. At the end of the election process, Algeria's candidate obtained a majority of 38 votes out of 41 voting countries, which reflects a great esteem for Algeria under the leadership of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. In the field of protection and promotion of human and people's rights at the continental level, as well as its continuous efforts to uphold the values and principles enshrined in the Constitutive Charter of the African Union and the interests of peoples and the whole continent. As a reminder, the court is composed of 11 judges who are nationals of member states in the African Union, elected by the Executive Council, composed of foreign ministers. On the sidelines of his participation in the proceedings of the 42nd session of the Executive Council of the African Union in Addis Ababa, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ramtal Amamra, held talks with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of Namibia, Netombo Nandi Ndaitwah, and many of his African counterparts, namely the Foreign Minister of Angola, Tete Antonio, the Foreign Minister of Rwanda, Vincent Biruta, the Foreign Minister of Uganda, Odongo Gigi Abubakar, and the Tanzanian Foreign Minister Stergome Natax, and the Foreign Minister of Somalia, Abshar Omar Jama, as well as the Deputy Foreign Minister of Cote d'Ivoire and the Deputy Foreign Minister of Niger. Ramtal Amamra also held talks with his Malian counterpart, Abdoulaye Diop, as well as the Chairman of the Commission of the Economic Community of West African States, Omar Touray. The talks revolved around the agenda of the session and the promotion of coordination in order to reach results that live up to the challenges faced by the continent in politics, security, and development. Within the framework of the fight against terrorism, and thanks to the qualitative efforts of the security services of the Ministry of National Defense, 3 terrorists turned themselves in to the military authorities in Burj Baji Mukhtar in the 6th military region. This concerns Malouki Abdurrahman, also known as Abdurraouf, and Malouki Sid Mohammed, also known as Abd Samad, and Malouki Al-Sharif, also known as Abd Nasser. Another terrorist turned himself into the military authorities in Ingizam in the same military region, and this concerns the so-called El-Tuji Omar, also known as Ali. The terrorists, who were active in terrorist groups in the Sahel region, were in possession of 4 Kalashnikov machine guns, 2 hand grenades, 12 ammunition magazines, 3 stork cradles, and a quantity of ammunition. This operation comes to consolidate the positive results obtained on the ground that reflect the great vigilance and firm determination of the elements of the National People's Army to preserve the security and stability of the country. Pursuant to the guidelines of the President of the Republic to expedite the installation of a specialized commercial court as a pillar that guarantees the achievement of judicial security for litigant investors, and within the new economic orientation based on encouraging investment, a specialized training in the new legal provisions is necessary. Let's discover more about this training with Anya Al-Bahri.
One of the most important decisions taken in the interest of trade and reviving the national economy under the new investment law is the installation of specialized commercial courts. These courts contribute to adjudicating many complex cases and disputes that occur between merchants and commercial establishments, even disputes in RNC spaces. international trade, intellectual property disputes, and disputes between banks, financial institutions, and insurances. The importance of giving these jurisdictions lies in considering commercial disputes under one jurisdiction after they were dominated by strictness between more than one jurisdiction. The installation of these courts comes from our keenness to respond to the call of the President of the Republic during the opening of the judicial year 2022-2023 to legislate the installation of specialized commercial courts to give a new impetus to judicial work through speeding up the settlement of disputes, reducing the duration of litigation, and improving the climate of commerce and business in a way that meets the aspirations of citizens, especially operators and investors. The composition of these courts includes specialized judges supported by specialized assistants who have also proven their worth with their experience and competence in dealing with cases related to trade and business. Today, they undergo training before assuming their duties. For us, as presidents of commercial court, it means unifying the work among the 12 specialized commercial courts. We need to know how to file a case, where to appeal it, how to challenge it in cassation, and the conduct of the case in general. 12 specialized commercial courts across the entire national territory have been installed in the headquarters of the judicial councils. They will work on resolving disputes and speeding up or reducing the period of litigation, which contributes to improving and developing the investment and trade climate in our country.
Now to non-hydrocarbon exports. Trade agreements are being established with several countries like Tunisia, Italy and Egypt to increase the national volume of exports in order to promote the country's economy. Sabrina Fergnet with the details.
It concerns loaded shipments of cement clinker amounting to 5,000 tons as a first export operation to Tunisia. Several other countries like Libya, Italy and France will benefit from this Algerian product. Another example of this operation is the exportation of power cable. 30,000 tons of it are produced by this company each year, while 400 tons are destined to be exported to 15 countries.
تنفيذا لتعليمات رؤساء البلدين.
This operation is part of the instructions of the two presidents of Algeria and Tunisia to reinforce cooperation between the two countries. 20 trucks took the road to our neighboring country, Tunisia. The operation will continue and will touch other countries such as Libya. Our total export volume amounts to $85 million. We export 25% of our products. Algeria is the second country in Africa that is producing these 220 kilovolt power cables, and the only country in the Maghreb to produce these electrical products. These Algerian investments match the international standards, and for an easy export operation, trade facilitations are being introduced, and it touched as well border crossing points, such as the one of Bushka in Tibissa province. The facilitations taken by the General Directorate of Customs Services contributed to the increase of the volume of non-hydrocarbons export targeted by the public authorities to $7 billion. A national strategy that will have a positive impact on several fields, but most importantly, it will significantly upgrade the country's economy.
The Minister of Communication, Mohamed Bouslimani, supervised in Bashar province the opening of the proceedings of the 4th training course on institutional communication for the southern provinces. The session gathered different media outlets and information professionals at different institutions. Following the arrest of the individual who threatened to bomb the headquarters of the Embassy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Algiers by the Algerian Security Services, the Saudi Embassy hailed the efforts of the Algerian authorities, further stressing its trust in the Algerian Security Services that spared no effort to protect the embassy and its staff from this threat and present this individual to justice. In France and before shutting down the country on March 7th, the unions organized on Thursday their 5th day of mobilization against the pension reform to maintain pressure on MPs who still hope to be able to debate the legal age by Friday. To Morocco now, where the Maroc-gate still follows Al Makhzen. Two new MEPs involved in the corruption scandal that shook the European Parliament were mentioned in an arrest warrant by the Belgian authorities. Maria Arena and Alessandra Moretti are linked to the investigation conducted by the Belgian authorities, and their names were also mentioned in the international arrest warrant that targeted Italian MEP Andrea Cozzolino, who was arrested last week for corruption, money laundering, and taking part in a criminal organization, according to the American media Politico. The warrant was delivered the 10th of February by the Belgian judge Michel Claes. According to the document, Mary Arena and Alessandra Moretti were members of a quadriumvirate with Cozzolino and the Belgian MEP Marc Tarabella, who was also arrested last week. The weekly French news magazine Marianne devoted its latest edition to Morocco and its corrupt practices. The magazine explained through a file why this country benefits from special treatment for many years, while recalling the Pegasus case, which made the headlines. The French magazine also addressed the old channel set up by Rabat and the case of Rachid Mbarki, a journalist at BFM TV. Manal Amari with the details.
Involved in a series of large-scale international scandals, the Makhzen regime is struggling to find new sources of influence. In a file published in its latest issue, entitled Espionage, Lobbying, Infiltration, People, Cannabis and Immigration, How Morocco is Holding Us, the French weekly magazine Marianne, which dedicated its latest issue to Morocco and its bad practices, outlined why this country benefited from special treatment for long years, while Rabat continues its wrongdoing and its serious slippage, such as the Maroc-gate scandal, which recently shook the European Parliament and remains a subject of much discussion. The magazine also recalled the Pegasus case, which made the headlines and in which Morocco was involved by using the spy software developed by the Zionist company NSO to wiretap several political personalities, journalists, and other activists. However, the outrage sparked in summer 2021 by revealing these practices dissipated. Even though Paris is primarily concerned, it did nothing regarding this case, while Brussels dispatched an inquiry committee on this matter. The resounding scandal, which recently blew up within the European Parliament, where the Makhzen bribed elected officials to have laws voted in its favor in Brussels, were also raised by the French weekly magazine, which considers Morocco untouchable, since it is one of the entry points for immigration to Europe and an entry point for drugs. Immigration and cannabis are worrying phenomenons that Morocco uses to blackmail the EU. Despite all these scandals, which Morocco is strongly involved, causing its isolation on the international scene, Rabat continues to deploy all possible methods to push its pawns, as was highlighted by the French magazine, citing the latest examples, namely the case of Rachid Mbarki, a journalist at BFM TV, who's no longer on air. The French-Moroccan journalist broadcasted on his nightly news bulletin stories which were not approved by the hierarchy, with an external influence to particularly benefit the Makhzen.
Among the victims is the journalist and writer Ignacio Cambrero, who's being spied on using the Pegasus software developed by the Zionist company NSO Group, according to the NGO Amnesty International, which on Wednesday called on the Moroccan authorities to put an end to the prosecution and harassment of the journalist in question, awaiting a decision from the Madrid Court of First Instance after his testimony on January 13th, following a new complaint from Morocco. According to Amnesty International, it is the fourth time that the Moroccan authorities try to silence the journalists by legal action as part of their strategy aiming to silence all voices criticizing their policy. The Moroccan Social Front, unions, associations, and political parties have announced their participation in the demonstrations planned for next Monday in Morocco to denounce the unprecedented, miserable life conditions and the violation of freedoms by Al Makhzen. Sabrina Tafirgini will tell us more.
Facing a regime that couldn't provide a decent life to its citizens, Moroccans keep invading the streets. These last months, Moroccan cities are witnessing massive demonstrations against the Makhzen regime. Poverty, human rights violation, injustice, and the total absence of the government made Moroccans outraged. Even if these protests are suppressed, the determination of Moroccans to snatch their basic human rights keeps getting stronger. Furthermore, it's worth mentioning that the Makhzen regime is using all the means to repress the peaceful demonstrations of citizens asking for their rights. Even the blind haven't been spared, undergoing the atrocity of the authorities. The Moroccan social front associations and unions are planning demonstrations the 20th of February against the Nargan regime.
The Moroccan occupation authorities continue to commit crimes against the Sahrawi civilian prisoners by subjecting them to various types of repression. The most recent case is that of the detainee Mohammed Ahnini al-Rohbani, victim of serious abuses perpetrated by a prison guard, according to Sahrawi sources. More details with Anya al-Bahri.
Once again, the Moroccan occupation authorities continue to commit crimes against the Sahrawi people by subjecting them to various types of inhuman treatment, the latest of which is the case of the detainee Mohammed Ahnini al-Rohbani, who was subjected to severe violations committed by the prison guard, according to Sahrawi sources. The wife of this detainee received a phone call informing her of the physical assault that her husband was subjected to in 8 Malul 2 prison, noting that the Sahrawi prisoner was severely beaten by a guard. This attack comes within the framework of the campaign of targeting cruel and racist treatment directed against the Sahrawi civilian prisoners of Gdimizik group by the director of Malul 2 prison, and comes after the numerous complaints filed by these prisoners to denounce their prison conditions. As a reminder, the civilian Sahrawi prisoner of Gdimizik group, Mohammed Ahnini al-Rohbani, is imprisoned in 8 Malul 2 prison on the outskirts of Agadir, following an unfair and severe ruling issued during the trial, in which the conditions of justice and guarantees were violated. The Association for the Protection of Sahrawi Political Detainees in Moroccan prisons recently warned of the danger that threatens the lives of the Sahrawi prisoners, especially Gdimizik group, due to the practices of the Moroccan occupier, which violate all international standards. It also condemned the systematic campaign against the detainees of Gdimizik group, aimed at undermining their dignity and taking revenge for their political stances. The Sahrawi civil prisoners of Gdimizik group are imprisoned in several Moroccan prisons after being sentenced to prison terms ranging from 20 years to life imprisonment at the end of unfair trials, with the acceptance of many international NGOs.
That was all for tonight's news. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.